Welcome back to the Mirror Moves, where neighborhood drama, entitled antics, and HOA Karens turn into stories you'll never forget. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, because trust me, you never want to miss what's coming next. This story today is about a HOA Karen rammed my snowman with her SUV. The sound that split the evening wasn't quite metal on metal and not quite avalanche. It was both, somehow. A single, brutal crunch, the kind that makes your bones feel hollow. When the powder drift finally settled, everyone could see it. The champagne white SUV. Yes, the very one its owner bragged about at every HOA meeting. Sat buckled like an accordion against the giant snowman in my front yard. The scarf on our frosty giant still fluttered in the breeze, smug as a flag on a conquered fort. My little girl squeezed my glove and whispered, "Is he okay?" Meaning the snowman, not the vehicle, and I honestly didn't know whether to laugh or call a therapist. A few hours earlier, that same day had felt like the universe throwing us a kindness. The sky was painfully blue, the air cold enough to sting your lungs clean, and every roofline wore a fresh white crown. My daughter and I decided to go big. Not cute little snowman big, monument big. We started in the morning, rolled and packed until our arms shook, watered the surface to glaze it, and stacked those rounds until the top came level with my hat. We carved a grin, pressed in smooth pebbles for eyes, and wrapped a deep maroon scarf around its neck. Two sturdy branches stretched out from its sides like it was daring winter to take a swing. Neighbors slowed on dog walks to admire it. Kids pointed from sleds and shouted that it was the biggest snowman they'd ever seen. For once, our place didn't feel like the front line in an HOA skirmish. It felt like the cheerful center of a snow globe. That is, until she arrived. You know the one. Clipboard as a personality. Sunglasses even on cloudy days. The kind of person who believes community standards are a calling from on high. Let's call her Karen because the shoe fits, and it's 2 sizes too tight. She marched across my yard in a heavy coat and a heavier mood, boots cracking through the crust of snow like punctuation marks. No hello. No nice day. Just a laser stare locked on our snowman, as if it had insulted her bloodline. "This," she said, flipping to a sheet that looked mysteriously like a random printout from the internet, "is out of compliance with the neighborhood's presentation guidelines. Oversized structures visible from the roadway are prohibited. You'll need to remove it by sundown." I blinked at her. "It's a snowman, not a spaceship launch pad. He'll be soup in a week." She scribbled like a court stenographer. "It obstructs sightlines for drivers, and it does not align with our aesthetic vision." "Your aesthetic vision," I said, smiling the kind of polite smile that could start a forest fire if you gave it oxygen. "He's staying." Her nostrils flared. She warned me I'd regret defiance and tromped away, each step promising paperwork, fines, and general misery. I didn't sweat it. Karen's threats were neighborhood weather, always in the forecast, rarely more than drizzle. We made cocoa, admired our glacial sentinel from the front window, and moved on with the day. Night fell quiet and glittering. Then an engine revved. I opened the door just in time to see headlights carve the yard into theater. Stage set, my snowman, center spotlight. The SUV idled at the curb, a low growl under its hood, and then it lunged, tires whining on the icy street like the opening note of a very stupid aria. "Wait," I started, "but you can't reason with a moving car or with someone who's convinced she's the hero in a story about public safety." The SUV plowed straight into the snowman with a violence that felt unreal. The hood folded. The bumper surrendered. The airbag popped like a cannon. The snowman? He shivered, shed a powdery shrug, and kept grinning his pebble grin. Porch lights snapped on up and down the block. Doors swung open. Neighbors spilled out in slippers and parka hoods, phones half raised in instinct. For a suspended second, nobody said anything. Then my daughter giggled. It was tiny at first, like a bubble rising, and then the relief of it caught, and other laughs answered. And suddenly the untouchable queen of rules was standing in the street, deflated airbag in her lap, precision-engineered pride steaming in the cold, while a 6-foot snowman mocked her with a carrot nose. She tumbled out of the driver's seat, cheeks the color of cranberry sauce, gesturing wildly. "He weaponized it," she shouted, voice pitching into siren territory. "It's reinforced. He embedded something in there. That is a dangerous structure." I said nothing. Sometimes silence is louder than any speech. She jabbed a finger at me. "You did this on purpose." You build a hazard. I could have been killed. By my yard's precipitation? I asked calmly. We rolled snow. We packed it. We gave him a scarf. A couple of neighbors murmured they'd watched us build the thing all afternoon. Others stared at her crushed grill and then at the unbothered snowman and did the math. Somewhere down the street, someone actually clapped once, then thought better of it. Karen tried to rally. This will be reported. This is a violation. You can't. This neighborhood has standards. The sentence tripped over the smoking front end of her standard-setting SUV and fell flat in the snow. A tow truck eventually arrived, beacons slicing lazy circles across the drifted lawns as it dragged the wounded vehicle away from the base of our frosty defender. Neighbors lingered longer than necessary, whispering, replaying the crunch, laughing in those sputtering bursts people can't hold in. My daughter leaned into me, eyes bright. He is okay, she said, satisfied. Inside, I tucked her into bed and told her the snowman wasn't magic, just very, very well made. But when I stood at the window a while later and saw him there, tall and untouched beneath the streetlight, scarf lifting like a victorious banner, I understood why she'd asked. He looked like a guardian. By morning, the comedy had curdled into something sharper. An email from the HOA hit my inbox with phrases like hazardous winter construction and reckless disregard. It asked pointedly whether I had used foreign materials to fortify a snow sculpture. The signature said board, but the voice belonged to one person. The rumor mill word to life. A hushed, did you put rocks in it, on the sidewalk. A cautious, maybe ice blocks, near a mailbox. I laughed it off, but the stage lights were already warming. That evening, an emergency meeting was announced in the community hall. Folding chairs, thermoses. Karen at the front in a dramatic neck brace, throat cleared for performance. Theatrical? Absolutely. Effective? We'd see. All I knew, standing under the buzzing fluorescence while neighbors settled and snow shook from coats, was this. The battle she'd declared with a gas pedal wasn't finished. But she'd made one mistake that even a snowman could see. She made everyone watch. By the time evening rolled around, the entire neighborhood had morphed into a swirling rumor mill. Everyone had heard some version of the snowman incident, though none of the stories matched. In one, I'd secretly poured concrete into its base. In another, Karen claimed I'd built a booby-trapped winter fortress. My personal favorite? That the snowman had been engineered for vehicle resistance, as though I moonlighted as an ice sculpture defense contractor. When I walked into the community hall for the emergency HOA meeting, the air practically buzzed with anticipation. Folding chairs scraped against the linoleum floor, neighbors whispered behind coffee thermoses, and snow still clung to boots like little trailing flags. At the front sat Karen, perched like a queen on her stage, neck brace secured dramatically, her clipboard balanced on her lap like a prop sword. She opened the meeting with a voice smooth enough to butter toast. Neighbors, she began, what happened yesterday is the perfect example of why rules exist. This, she gestured vaguely toward me, avoiding my actual name like it tasted bad, is why safety matters. We could have lost lives. Gasps rippled through the crowd, mostly from the two people she still had wrapped around her finger. But others exchanged skeptical glances, lips twitching to hide smirks. My snowman had not, in fact, threatened to destroy the HOA's fragile sense of order. Her SUV had threatened to destroy itself. Then she pivoted into full theatrical mode. According to Karen's version, she had been performing a routine safety inspection when my reinforced structure maliciously resisted her vehicle. The SUV was totaled. Her injuries, she said, laying a hand delicately across her brace, may be permanent. If the goal was pity, she overshot and landed somewhere closer to parody. When it was my turn to speak, I stayed seated and spoke calmly, laying out the facts. I built a snowman with my daughter. We rolled snow, we packed it, we laughed, and that was the extent of it. We used no foreign materials, no metal, no concrete, no hidden booby traps. I reminded everyone that at least 3 neighbors had watched us build it in broad daylight. But if there's one thing Karen excelled at, it was narrative manipulation. So you admit, she interrupted loudly, that you created a massive obstruction in violation of community safety guidelines. She waved a thick stack of papers as if they were legal precedents from the Supreme Court, even though I'm fairly sure they were HOA landscaping suggestions from 2014. Before I could respond, a quiet voice from the back broke through the tension. "I have it on video." Everyone turned. It was Frank, the retiree with the kind of dry wit that could set granite cracking. He raised his hand and said, "My Ring doorbell caught the whole thing, start to finish. I'll be happy to play it at the next board review." Karen froze mid-blink, like a statue halfway through denial. "That's an invasion of privacy," she stammered, her voice wobbling for the first time all evening. Frank shrugged. "Public street. Public view. Your headlights looked great, by the way." A few chuckles slipped out from the crowd, and Karen's jaw clenched hard enough to shatter icicles. The energy in the room shifted. The authority she'd wielded like a cudgel for years began to wobble on its axis. Karen attempted to recover, flipping immediately into counterattack mode. "This isn't about me," she said, loud enough to shake the coffee urns in the back. "This is about a resident endangering children. What if kids had been sledding nearby? What if my SUV had swerved?" The logic crumbled as fast as the SUV's bumper, but her delivery was all righteous fury. The board looked caught between two storms, Karen's bluster and the simple, solid facts stacking against her. One member cleared his throat and suggested they review all evidence, including Frank's footage, before pursuing fines or claims. Karen protested, predictably, claiming that showing the video would set a dangerous precedent. Dangerous for her, maybe. By the time the meeting adjourned, murmurs filled the hall. Neighbors clumped into little islands of conversation, whispering, laughing under their breath, and casting glances toward Karen as she stormed out, clipboard gripped like a battle axe. It wasn't open rebellion yet, but the spell she'd held over the block had cracked. I returned home to find a folded notice taped to my mailbox. A temporary warning claiming my mailbox height was non-compliant by 1/4 inch. My daughter pointed at it and said, "She's mad." I nodded, pulling it down. "Very mad." And that was just the opening salvo. Within the next 48 hours, I received 3 separate HOA violation letters. One accusing me of obstructing landscaping symmetry with unauthorized snow formations. Another alleging my recycling bin remained curbside for 6 minutes past designated collection timing. And my personal favorite, a formal reprimand declaring that the sled tracks in our yard altered neighborhood aesthetics without approval. Every envelope smelled faintly of Karen's perfume. But here's the thing she didn't account for. The neighborhood had changed. Quietly, neighbors began approaching me, at mailboxes, walking dogs, waiting for deliveries. They whispered stories about their own battles, fines over tulips, demands to repaint shutters 3 different shades of beige, threats over toddlers' toys left in yards. It turned out, I wasn't the first target of Karen's crusades. I was just the loudest example. That solidarity started small. A woman on the next street overbuilt a snowman with her grandson and gave it a scarf identical to ours. A dad 2 houses down lined up 3 tiny snowmen like sentries across his lawn. Within a week, snowmen popped up all over the block, each one bigger, bolder, and cheekier than the last. It was rebellion, wrapped in frost and scarves. Karen stomped through the neighborhood in her heavy boots, clipboards snapping like a weapon, issuing warnings she couldn't possibly enforce fast enough. Each threat only fueled the defiance. Kids were giggling, parents were smirking, and somewhere between the carrot noses and stick arms, our sterile little HOA showcase had turned into a winter carnival. The frost war had begun. And Karen? Karen wasn't just humiliated. She was plotting. Karen's tantrum over the snowman should have been the peak of her theatrics, but anyone who underestimated her had never seen her in full war mode. By the end of that week, her anger had mutated into something bigger, louder, and far more dangerous. A crusade to restore order to the neighborhood by crushing me and anyone who sided with me. Her strategy? Weaponize the HOA. Every morning felt like a siege. I'd step onto the porch to find another envelope taped to my door, stamped with that overly dramatic HOA letterhead. The accusations became more absurd by the day. Day 1. Unauthorized modifications to property aesthetics. Translation, my snowman. Day 2. Excessive driveway moisture endangering pedestrians. Translation, melting snow. Day 3. Potential wildlife hazards from carrot-based lawn obstructions. Translation, the snowman's nose. By the 4th notice, even my daughter, who was 6, rolled her eyes and said, She's losing it. But Karen wasn't just burying me in paperwork. She was trying to isolate me. She organized a neighborhood safety patrol made up of 3 of her diehard loyalists, who walked the block wearing neon vests, clipboards in hand, pretending they were federal agents. They'd stand in front of my house, scribbling observations like spies caught in a bad sitcom. What Karen didn't anticipate was the rebellion. Frank, the Ring doorbell hero, put up his own snowman right in the center of his yard, complete with a little wooden sign that read, "Certified non-hazardous structure." Within days, half the neighborhood followed suit. Every yard sprouted its own snowman. Some wore sunglasses and scarves. One had a cigar sticking out of its mouth. Frank even built a tiny replica of Karen herself, a clipboard-wielding snow effigy glaring across the street. It became a silent protest against her iron rule. Kids started calling it the Frosty Resistance, and even parents who used to avoid HOA politics were laughing behind curtains while proudly stacking snowballs on their lawns. Karen tried to issue warnings, but she couldn't keep up. Her clipboard was her sword, but the battlefield had shifted, and she was losing fast. Cornered and furious, Karen made her boldest move yet. She served me with an official notice of intent to sue. The letter, clearly drafted by her lawyer cousin who once got disbarred in Nevada, claimed I had engineered a reinforced snow structure intentionally designed to cause vehicular damage. She demanded $14,000 for her destroyed SUV, $6,500 for emotional trauma, and an apology acknowledging negligence and malice. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee, but then Frank reminded me. Karen's power didn't come from being right. It came from being loud. If I didn't respond, she'd spin the silence into guilt. So, we started planning. One evening, Frank knocked on my door carrying his laptop and a thermos of coffee. "It's time," he said, sliding into my kitchen. He pulled up the video, the unedited, high-definition footage from his Ring camera, and my jaw dropped all over again. The SUV sat idling. Her headlights blazed. And then, rev, squeal, slam. Karen gunned it like she was auditioning for a Fast and Furious sequel. There was no accident. No loss of control. No innocent inspection gone wrong. It was deliberate. Frank grinned, sipping his coffee like a man who had just loaded the ultimate weapon. "When she pushes this lawsuit," he said, "we bury her." By now, the block was split in 2. On Team Karen, there were her loyalists, 2 retirees she'd frightened with horror stories about property values, and a couple who owed her favors after she approved their patio extension. On Team Snowman, there was basically everyone else. Parents, kids, even the mailman, who'd started dropping HOA letters into my mailbox with a quiet, knowing shake of his head. Neighbors began slipping me information. A woman named Cheryl whispered that Karen had once fined her for planting unauthorized tulips. Paul, a quiet accountant down the street, confessed that he'd seen financial inconsistencies in HOA budgets during his brief stint on the board. Little cracks were forming in Karen's empire, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about a snowman anymore. This was about control, power, and years of pent-up frustration finally bubbling to the surface. The tension reached its peak at the next HOA board meeting. Karen arrived like a general storming into battle. Neck brace, cane, and an entire binder labeled Community Evidence Dossier. She launched into a full-on tirade, accusing me of engineering an ice-based death trap, endangering children and wildlife, conspiring with known saboteurs, meaning Frank. Her voice thundered, but something had shifted. People weren't nodding anymore. They were smirking. And then, from the back, Paul raised his hand and asked one question that detonated the room. "Karen, would you like to explain why the HOA budget lists a $4,200 spot charge in Aspen under community security improvements?" The silence that followed was louder than Karen's yelling. Her face went crimson, her lips twitched, and she stammered something about classified allocations. That was the moment her authority began to collapse. But she wasn't finished, not yet. She was about to make her most dangerous move. Karen's theatrics had reached a fever pitch, but the storm she had been brewing for months was finally about to hit full force. And this time, she wouldn't be able to spin her way out. The day of the hearing arrived like the climax of a movie. I walked into the courthouse with a thick binder of evidence under my arm and my daughter's small hand gripping mine for luck. Across the aisle sat Karen, dressed head to toe in a sharp navy suit. Her neck brace mysteriously gone, but her cane still in tow. Because, of course, drama demanded props. Her lawyer, a slick, overly confident man in an expensive suit, opened with a speech that sounded like it had been ripped straight from a TV courtroom drama. He painted me as a reckless, negligent neighbor who weaponized snow to cause property destruction and lifelong trauma. Karen sniffled into a tissue, shaking her head for the cameras that weren't there. Then it was my turn. I calmly explained how my daughter and I had built the snowman, how Karen had threatened fines, and how she had repeatedly escalated until that night when she aimed her SUV straight at it. And then, Frank stepped up. He plugged his laptop into the projector and hit play. The courtroom went silent. There it was in full HD. Karen's SUV sitting idly at the curb, her headlights glaring like a predator's eyes. The rev of her engine, loud and deliberate, her tires squealing as she slammed the gas. The bone-jarring crunch of her luxury SUV folding like paper against the snowman. When the video ended, the silence was deafening. Then came the whispers. Karen's lawyer stammered, trying to object, claiming the footage was manipulated. But the judge raised a hand and shut him down. The evidence was undeniable. Before Karen could recover, Paul took the stand with the real bombshell: HOA financial records. He walked the judge through spa charges, luxury dinners, and even a $3,800 security improvement that turned out to be a weekend getaway in Aspen, all signed off by Karen herself. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even Karen's own lawyer glanced sideways at her, realizing, for the first time, that his client had been sitting on a powder keg of fraud. At that moment, Karen's empire collapsed in real time. The verdict was swift and brutal. Karen's lawsuit was dismissed in its entirety. She was ordered to pay my legal fees. And, in a twist no one saw coming, the HOA board announced an internal audit into financial irregularities, right there in the courtroom. Karen's face drained of color. For the first time since this began, she was silent. Word spread fast. By nightfall, the whole neighborhood knew. Neighbors gathered on sidewalks, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, and congratulating each other like they'd all just won a battle together. Because in a way, they had. The HOA board collapsed within weeks. Karen was forced to step down after the financial audit confirmed Paul's findings. Frank was elected HOA president in a landslide, with Paul as treasurer. For the first time in years, people actually trusted the board again. Karen? She vanished. Some say she sold her house to cover legal debts. Others claim she packed a moving truck at 2 a.m. and disappeared under cover of darkness. Her house sat empty for months, the curtains drawn like a monument to her downfall. That spring, the community held an unofficial festival called Frosty Day to celebrate their newfound freedom. Kids built dozens of snowmen, some towering 6 feet tall, each one proudly wrapped in scarves and sunglasses. Frank printed out a photo of the original indestructible snowman and taped it to the HOA Community Center wall under a handwritten sign that read, "The snowman that defeated the HOA tyrant." My daughter tugged my hand, smiling up at me. "The snowman's a hero," she whispered. And you know what? She was right. Because sometimes the smallest things, a kid's snowman, a Ring camera, a neighborhood fed up with fear, are the spark that burns down an empire built on intimidation. Karen tried to control everything. In the end, she lost everything.